An exciting story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings, where a doctor becomes involved with a millionaire patient who owns an enormous fortune. They fall in love, but she discovers he is married. The white coat glided down the corridor of St. Michael's Hospital like a solitary sail on troubled waters. Emily Mitchell walked with the precision that characterized her, her footsteps echoing against the antiseptic floor as she consulted patient charts on her tablet. 20 years of medicine had sculpted in her a mask of efficiency that few could penetrate. Her colleagues called her the Ice Lady of Cardiology, a nickname she secretly appreciated. After all, wasn't that her goal? To keep herself protected, shielded like the heart she operated on daily. That June morning, however, something was different in the air. The hospital corridors vibrated with an unusual energy, whispers and nervous glances multiplied among the staff. Emily ignored the commotion as she always did. Her mind was focused on the 3 complex procedures scheduled for that day, on the lives that depended on her absolute concentration. Dr. Mitchell. The shrill voice of Nancy, the head nurse of the emergency department, cut through her thoughts. "We need you urgently in the ER." Emily frowned, checking her wristwatch. "I have surgery in 40 minutes, Nancy." "It's a special case," Nancy insisted, her eyes shining with a mixture of concern and excitement. "Nathan Reed had a collapse during a meeting. The paramedics are arriving." The name caused a small tremor throughout the entire hospital. Nathan Reed wasn't just any patient. He was a living legend of American entrepreneurship, known both for his innovations in sustainable energy and for his social projects. Emily had seen his face in magazines, newspapers, even in a documentary about visionary entrepreneurs. "Dr. Parker can attend to him," Emily responded, maintaining her professional tone. "He's on emergency duty today." "It was a specific request from the family," Nancy explained quickly. "They want the best in the hospital, and everyone knows that's you." Emily sighed internally. It was always like this, rich and influential, families demanding special attention, as if money could buy priority over other equally needy patients. But before she could protest, the noise of the emergency department's automatic doors opening interrupted her, and a team of paramedics entered, pushing a stretcher. Time seemed to slow down when Emily saw the unconscious man. Nathan Reed was pale. His normally tan skin now had a grayish tone that she knew all too well. His features, though tensed by pain, maintained a dignity that surprised her. It wasn't the conventional beauty she expected to see in a magnate. It was something deeper, more genuine. Pressure 90/60, irregular heart rate, intense precordial, pain before fainting, reported one of the paramedics as they transferred the patient to a hospital stretcher. Emily took command instantly, years of training taking over. EKG immediately. Prepare doses of nitrate and morphine. I want central, access and continuous monitoring. While her team moved with practiced efficiency, Emily began her initial examination. Her fingers, trained by decades of experience, detected subtleties that machines still couldn't capture. There was something about the rhythm of that heart that intrigued her. It wasn't a simple heart attack, there were more layers there. "Where is his wife?" Emily asked without taking her eyes off the cardiac monitor. "Mrs. Sophia is on her way," Nancy replied. "She was at a charity event when it happened." The electrocardiogram began to form its dance of lines on the monitor, telling the story of that heart in crisis. Emily narrowed her eyes, years of experience decoding each variation, each deviation from the normal pattern. "Prepare the catheterization lab," she ordered, "and call Dr. Torres to cover my 11 o'clock surgery. This case will require full attention." It was at that moment that Nathan Reed opened his eyes. They were a deep green, almost translucent under the hospital's fluorescent light. For an instant, a single instant that seemed to stretch in time, those eyes met hers. There was no fear in them, as she often saw in serious patients. There was something more, a kind of recognition, as if, even amid pain and confusion, he truly saw her. "Welcome back, Mr. Reed," Emily said, maintaining her professional tone. "You're at St. Michael's Hospital. I'm Dr. Emily Mitchell, the cardiologist responsible for your case." He tried to speak, but she stopped him with a gentle gesture. "Don't strain yourself now. We need to do some urgent tests. Your family is already on the way." A weak smile crossed his face, and for some reason that Emily couldn't or didn't want to understand, that smile seemed to pierce through all her carefully constructed defenses. The following hours were a whirlwind of procedures, tests, and quick decisions. Emily discovered that the case was even more complex than she had initially imagined. It wasn't just a common coronary problem. There was an underlying condition that would require prolonged follow-up. When she finally left the procedure room, she found the corridor crowded. Sophia Reed, an elegant woman in her 40s, was surrounded by assistants and family members. Her made-up face couldn't completely hide the panic in her eyes. "Hey, doctor." Sophia's voice trembled slightly, betraying the composure she was trying to maintain. Emily explained the situation with her usual clarity, detailing the procedure performed and the necessary treatment. She maintained her professional tone, even when she noticed how Sophia gripped her own purse too tightly, as if she needed to hold onto something to avoid falling apart. "He'll be fine," Emily concluded, allowing herself a moment of gentleness. "But he'll need intensive care in the coming days and significant changes in his lifestyle after that." "Nathan was never good at taking care of himself," Sophia commented, more to herself than to Emily. "He always put work, projects, responsibilities, everything above his own health." Something in the way Sophia spoke, a mixture of affection and old exasperation, made Emily wonder about the dynamics of that marriage. She immediately dismissed the thought. It wasn't her role to speculate about patients' personal lives. After the family left, Emily returned to Nathan's room for a final check before ending her shift. He was awake, watching the city through the hospital window. The late afternoon light painted golden shadows on his profile. "How are you feeling?" she asked, checking the monitors. "Like someone who just discovered they're not immortal," he replied, his voice stronger than she expected. There was a tone of irony there, a sharp intelligence that caught her off guard. "No one is," she responded, maintaining her professionalism. "And the sooner we accept that, the better we take care of ourselves." "You seem like someone who has always taken very good care of yourself," he observed, his green eyes studying her with a disconcerting intensity. Emily felt something strange in her stomach, a sensation she hadn't experienced in a long time. "Rest now, Mr. Reed. Tomorrow we'll begin discussing your treatment in detail." When she was about to leave the room, his voice reached her again. "Doctor Mitchell." She turned, one hand on the doorknob. "Thank you for saving my life today." It was a simple phrase, one she had heard hundreds of times before, but there was something in the way he said it, a raw sincerity, stripped of drama or pretension, that made her heart, that organ she knew so well in theory, do a little somersault in her chest. That night, driving home through the rain-slicked streets of Boston, Emily found herself thinking about Nathan Reed's green eyes, about how they seemed to carry stories that she unwittingly wanted to know, about how, for the first time in a long time, her so carefully constructed defenses seemed to have found a small but significant crack. What she didn't know as she parked her car in the garage of her Beacon Hill apartment was that crack was just the beginning, that some stories, like some hearts, have their own plans, regardless of how much we try to control them. The days following Nathan Reed's hospitalization transformed the routine at St. Michael's Hospital. The constant flow of important visitors, businessmen, politicians, celebrities, created an unusual movement in the always discreet corridors of the cardiac wing. Emily observed that coming and going with a mixture of irritation and fascination, maintaining the professional distance she had always valued. But there was something different about the morning visits to room 507. Nathan wasn't the typical VIP patient she was used to treating, those who turned their medical condition into a stage for drama and attention. On the contrary, in the moments when he was alone, she often found him reading or making notes in a small black notebook. "You shouldn't be working," Emily reprimanded him on one of these mornings while checking his vital signs. "It's not work," he replied, closing the notebook with an enigmatic smile. "They're reflections. Sometimes we need a scare to start writing the things that really matter. Emily raised an eyebrow, her skilled fingers adjusting the IV drip. "And what really matters, Mr. Reed?" "Nathan," he gently corrected. "Please. And as for what matters, well, that's the question I've been asking myself during these sleepless nights." There was something in his voice, a controlled vulnerability like a door left ajar, that made Emily pause her mechanical movement of noting in the chart. Their eyes met for a moment that lasted a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "Insomnia won't help your recovery," she deflected, returning to her usual professionalism. "I can prescribe something to help you sleep." "No," he quickly responded. "I prefer to be awake, even if it's to face my own ghosts." It was at that moment that Sophia entered the room, elegant as always in a navy blue silk ensemble. Emily noticed how Nathan automatically straightened up in bed, as if putting on an invisible armor. "Good morning, darling." Sophia approached for a gentle kiss on her husband's forehead. "Dr. Mitchell, how is he?" "Progressing well," Emily replied, keeping her tone neutral, "but he'll still need at least another week of hospitalization." "A week?" Sophia frowned her perfectly outlined brow. "But we have the foundation event. Nathan needs to be present. He's the main donor." "Sophia," Nathan began in a warning tone. "Mrs. Reed," Emily interrupted, her voice acquiring a steely edge that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. "Your husband suffered a serious cardiac event. We're not talking about a passing indisposition. He needs time to recover properly." The silence that followed was as dense as fog. Sophia stared at her with a mixture of surprise and something close to hostility. Nathan, in turn, had an almost amused gleam in his eyes. "Of course," Sophia finally yielded, composing herself. "Health is the most important thing. I'll reschedule all commitments." When Emily left the room, she felt strangely disturbed. It wasn't common for her to lose her composure that way, even if subtly. Something about that family dynamic bothered her in a way she didn't want to examine too closely. The days transformed into a delicate dance. Emily found herself extending her visits to room 507 beyond what was necessary, engaged in conversations that began with his cardiac condition and inevitably drifted to other territories. Nathan had a gift for asking questions that disarmed her, for listening in a way that made each word seem important. On a particularly quiet afternoon, she found him contemplating the city through the hospital window, sitting in an armchair that the nurses had authorized. "The sunset in Boston never fails to be spectacular," he commented when he noticed her entering the room. "Even seen through a hospital window?" "Especially through a hospital window," he smiled. "Everything gains another meaning when you almost lose the chance to see it again." Emily approached the window, allowing herself a moment of contemplation. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the bay sparkled as if it were sprinkled with diamonds. "Do you never think about stopping to observe these things, Dr. Mitchell?" "I have a rather busy schedule," she automatically responded. "That's not what I asked," he gently insisted. Emily felt an inexplicable shiver run up her spine. "Mr. Reed." "Nathan," he corrected again, turning to face her. "Please, after holding my heart in your hands, I think we can dispense with some formalities." The comment caught her off guard, making her release a small laugh. Technically, it was just some catheters and stents. "Still," he smiled, and there was something in that smile that made the air seem thinner. "You know what else I've been thinking about during these sleepless nights?" Emily knew she should end that conversation, that she should maintain the professional distance that had always been her trademark, but something stronger than her reason made her ask, "What?" "About how we spend our entire lives chasing things that, in the end, don't matter as much as we thought. About how we build walls so high around ourselves that we forget what it's like to see the horizon." His words reverberated inside her like a distant bell. Emily felt her usual defenses falter, as if something in her armor was beginning to crack. "Sometimes, walls are necessary," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. "Are they really?" he questioned, his green eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart, precisely it, beat in a different rhythm. "Or do we just convince ourselves of that, because it's easier than risking?" Before Emily could respond, they heard footsteps in the corridor. She quickly moved away from the window, resuming her professional posture at the exact moment a nurse entered to check vital signs. That night, in her silent apartment, Emily found herself standing in front of her own window, observing the city lights. Nathan's words echoed in her mind, mixed with memories she had buried deep. Her mother's tired face after yet another double shift, her father's empty excuses, the promise she had made to herself never to allow herself to be as vulnerable as they were. Her phone vibrated with a message. It was from the hospital, some of Nathan's test results she had requested. Numbers, graphs, objective data she knew so well. But for the first time in a long time, Emily wondered if there were things that tests couldn't show. If there were heartbeats that couldn't be measured by cardiac monitors. The sound of an ambulance cut through the night outside, bringing her back to reality. Emily shook her head, trying to push away those dangerous thoughts. She was a professional, one of the best in her field. She couldn't afford the luxury of indulging in romantic musings like a teenager. But when she closed her eyes that night, it wasn't clinical cases or medical procedures that populated her dreams. They were green eyes that seemed to see through all her defenses and words about walls and horizons that made her heart, that treacherous organ she thought she knew so well, beat in a completely new and frightening rhythm. What Emily didn't know was that, at that same moment in his hospital room, Nathan was also awake, writing in his black notebook words that would forever change the destiny of both. Nathan's hospital discharge came like a page being abruptly turned. Emily spent the entire morning reviewing his prescriptions, ensuring that every detail of the outpatient follow-up was perfectly organized. It was her usual protocol with all patients, she told herself. Nothing beyond the professionalism that characterized her. "Are you always this meticulous with all your patients, doctor?" Sophia's voice sounded behind her as she finalized the last notes in the electronic chart. Emily turned, maintaining the neutral expression that years of practice had perfected. "Always, Mrs. Reed. It's my duty to ensure that each patient receives the best possible follow-up." Sophia studied her for a moment, her shrewd eyes like those of a bird of prey. There was something in her gaze that made Emily wonder if her professional mask was as impeccable as she thought. "You know, Doctor," Sophia began, adjusting the strap of her designer handbag, "when you live in our social circle, you learn to recognize certain patterns." "I'm not sure I understand," Emily responded, though her heart, that rebellious organ, had slightly accelerated. "Nathan has this effect on people," Sophia continued, her voice now softer, almost confidential. "He makes them feel special, unique. It's a natural gift of his, or perhaps a curse, depending on your point of view." Before Emily could respond, Nathan appeared at the door, already dressed in casual clothes that, even so, screamed his social status. There was something different about him, a contained energy, as if he were carrying an electric current under his skin. "Are we ready?" he asked, his gaze meeting Emily's for a fraction of a second before turning to his wife. "Almost," Sophia replied, moving to organize some flowers and cards that had accumulated during the hospitalization. "I just need to check with the secretary about the rescheduled commitments." When Sophia left the room, a silence dense as mist fell between Emily and Nathan. It was the first time they had been alone since that sunset conversation days ago. "So, this is it," he finally said, his voice carrying a weight that wasn't there before. "Yes," Emily replied, keeping her eyes fixed on the tablet in her hands. "Remember all the recommendations, no excesses of any kind, and the follow-ups are weekly for the first month." Emily, the way he pronounced her name, without the title, without formalities, made something inside her tremble. She raised her eyes, meeting that intense green that had begun to populate her most intimate thoughts. "Please," she said softly, almost a whisper, "don't complicate things." "It's already complicated," he replied, taking a step in her direction, "since the moment I opened my eyes on that stretcher and saw you." Emily felt her world dangerously oscillate. All her defenses, built over years, of observing others' mistakes, seemed fragile as paper in the face of the raw truth in that confession. "Mr. Reed," she began, trying to regain control. "No," he interrupted, his voice now firmer. "Don't hide behind titles and formalities. You feel it too, I know you do." The sound of heels in the corridor made Emily quickly step back, putting a safe distance between them, just as Sophia returned to the room. "The car is waiting," Sophia announced, her tone too casual to be natural. "Doctor, once again, thank a key. You for everything." Emily nodded mechanically, watching as the couple prepared to leave. At the last moment, Nathan turned. "Until next week, Dr. Mitchell," he said, and there was so much hidden in those simple words that she felt her chest tighten. After they left, Emily remained in her office well beyond her normal hours, pretending to busy herself with charts and reports. When she finally left the hospital, night had already fallen over Boston. In her car, stuck in traffic by the harbor, she allowed herself to relive each moment of the past few days. Each look, each unspoken word, each silence laden with meaning. Her trained mind tried to rationalize, to categorize those sensations as simple emotional transference, something common between doctors and patients in intense situations. But her heart knew the truth. The days that followed were an exercise in self-control. Emily immersed herself in her work with even more intensity, as if the long hours in the operating room could erase the memory of those green eyes, of that voice that seemed to touch something dormant inside her. It was on one of these nights, when she was finally arriving home after a particularly exhausting day, that she found an envelope in her mailbox. No return address, just her name written in an elegant handwriting that she recognized immediately. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the envelope. Inside, there were a few pages torn from a black notebook covered with the same handwriting. Emily began to read, sitting on the floor of her entrance hall, completely forgetting the world around her. "Dear Emily, there are moments in life when all our certainties crumble. For me, it was when my heart decided to fail, ironically, leading me to you. They say we don't choose who we fall in love with, but I believe that sometimes the universe chooses for us with a wisdom that our reason cannot comprehend." Emily let the pages fall into her lap, her heart beating at a rhythm that any cardiologist would consider alarming. Nathan's words were like a scalpel, cutting through all the layers of protection she had built over the years. Her phone rang, making her jump. It was an unknown number. With still trembling hands, she answered. "Emily?" Nathan's voice sounded from the other end, low and intense. "We need to talk." She closed her eyes, feeling the world spin around her. She knew she should hang up. She knew she should burn those pages and forget all of this. It was the protocol. It was the correct thing. It was the safe thing. But for the first time in her life, Emily Mitchell was tired of being safe. "Where?" she asked, her voice almost unrecognizable to her own ears. What she didn't know as she wrote down the address of a discreet cafe in Charlestown was that that decision would be just the beginning. That some stories once started take on a life of their own, and that the heart, that stubborn muscle she thought she knew so well, held secrets that no medical exam could ever reveal. The cafe in Charlestown was exactly the kind of place that went unnoticed by Boston's elite, hidden on a quiet street, with wooden tables worn by time and a privileged view of the harbor. It was an unlikely refuge for someone like Nathan Reed. Perhaps that's exactly why he had chosen it. Emily arrived. First her heart, that eternal traitor, beating in an irregular rhythm that she would recognize as dangerous in any of her patients. She chose a table in the back, where the golden light of late afternoon created elongated shadows through the antique windows. She still held the pages from the black notebook, now slightly wrinkled from how many times she had reread them during the last few hours. Nathan's words seemed to pulse between her fingers, as if they had a life of their own. "I've spent my entire life building empires, Emily, transforming ideas into reality, numbers into fortunes. But never until I met you had I understood the true meaning of the word value. There's something in your gaze that dismantles all my certainties, that makes all my achievements seem empty." The sound of familiar footsteps pulled her from her thoughts. Nathan was standing in front of her, more casual than she had ever seen him, in a light blue shirt and dark pants. There was a vulnerability in his posture that made him seem more human, less the untouchable magnate that magazines portrayed. "You came," he said simply, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and tension. "I shouldn't have come," Emily replied, but made no move to get up. Nathan sat down across from her, his green eyes immediately finding the notebook pages in her hands. A small smile appeared on his lips. "You read it?" "Several times," she admitted, surprising herself with the honesty. "That's why I know this is impossible." "Impossible," he repeated, leaning slightly forward. "Or just frightening?" A waitress approached, momentarily breaking the tension between them. Nathan ordered a coffee, Emily a chamomile tea, her medical mind still trying to calm her nerves through natural means. "How's your heart?" she asked, trying to regain some professional control of the situation. "Beating stronger than normal. At this moment," he replied with a smile that made hers accelerate in response. "But I imagine that's not what you want to know, Doctor." "Nathan," she began, but he gently interrupted her. "Before you list all the reasons why this is wrong, impossible, or unethical, let me say something," he spoke, his voice low and intense. "I've spent the last few weeks thinking about every aspect of my life, about every choice, every commitment, every mask, I've worn over the years. You know what I discovered?" Emily slightly shook her head, hypnotized by the intensity of his gaze. "I discovered that I had been dead inside long before my heart decided to fail. Living a life that others wrote for, me following a script I never questioned, until I met you. You have a wife," Emily said, the words coming out like stones from her throat. "An entire life built." "A golden prison," he gently corrected. "Sophia and I, for a long time we've just been partners in a company called Appearances. She has her own secrets, her own dissatisfactions, but we maintain the facade because it's easier, more convenient for everyone. And now, you want to tear everything down because of what? A momentary attraction to your doctor." Nathan extended his hand across the table, his fingers lightly touching hers before she could withdraw. The contact, even brief, sent waves of electricity through her body. "You know it's more than that," he said, his voice husky. "Much more." Emily pulled her hand back, but the warmth of the touch remained like an invisible mark on her skin. "I'm a doctor, Nathan. I swore to an ethical code. I can't—" "You're no longer my doctor," he interrupted. "I transferred my follow-up to another cardiologist this morning." The news hit her like a punch to the stomach. "What? Why?" "Because I don't want you to have excuses to hide behind your lab coat. Because I want that. When you look at me, you see just a man who is completely in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and possibilities. Emily felt her world spin on its axis, all her certainties, crumbling like a house of cards. "It's not that simple," she whispered. "No," he agreed, "it's not. But sometimes the most complex things are the ones most worth it." The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that reminded Emily of that conversation in the hospital. How everything had changed since then. How she had changed. "I need time," she finally said, standing up. It's too much to process right now." Nathan nodded, respecting her space. "I'll wait, for as long as necessary." When Emily left the cafe, her legs were trembling slightly. The night air was laden with the scent of blossoms, and her heart seemed to want to escape from her chest. In her apartment, hours later, she tried to concentrate on medical articles, on clinical cases, on anything that might distract her mind from Nathan's words, but it was useless. Each beat of her heart seemed to echo his name. Each thought took her back to that cafe table, to that moment when her entire world began to change. Her phone vibrated with a message. It was him. Some people spend their entire lives looking for a love that makes them feel alive. I found mine wearing a cardiac monitor. Sleep well, Emily. She let the phone fall onto the bed, her defenses finally crumbling. Silent tears began to roll down her face. Tears for all the times she had denied herself feeling, for all the walls she had built, for all the fear that now consumed her. Because deep down, more frightening than the possibility of surrendering to this impossible love, was the certainty that it was already too late to turn back. Her heart, that rebellious organ she thought she knew so well, had already made its choice long before her mind admitted it. What she didn't know was that, at that exact moment, in a mansion in Brookline, Sophia Reed was also awake, planning her next moves with the precision of a chess player. Because some love stories are also stories of war, and not all broken hearts heal with surgery. The days following the encounter at the cafe transformed Emily's life into a constant exercise in self-control. At the hospital, she immersed herself in her cases with an almost feverish intensity, as if each procedure, each diagnosis, could erase the memory of that afternoon in Charlestown. But in the quiet hours of night, when she was alone in her apartment, Nathan's words echoed in her mind like a song that refuses to be forgotten. His messages continued to arrive, discreet but persistent. They were never invasive or demanding, just small fragments of thoughts, observations about the day, reflections that seemed to speak directly to her restless heart. Today, I saw an elderly couple holding hands in Boston Common. I wondered if they had faced their own impossibilities to be together. The sunset today reminded me of our conversation in the hospital. How strange that some moments can change an entire life, isn't it? I passed by St. Michael's doors today. My heart, the one you fixed, gave a leap. I think it recognizes its territory. Emily never responded, but she kept each message, rereading them at the most improbable hours, feeling simultaneously guilty and alive in a way she hadn't experienced in years. It was on one of these sleepless nights that her phone rang. The hospital number flashed on the screen, and she answered immediately, her professional mode activating by reflex. "Dr. Mitchell." Nancy's voice, the head nurse, sounded tense. "Sorry to bother you so late, but we have a delicate situation. Mrs. Sophia Reed has been admitted to the emergency room." Emily's world seemed to freeze for an instant. What happened? An attempt to... Well, she took a significant amount of medication. She's stable now, but... "I'm on my way," Emily interrupted, already looking for her keys. The journey to the hospital was a blur of chaotic thoughts and corrosive guilt. When she arrived at the emergency room, she found Nathan sitting in one of the waiting room chairs, his face buried in his hands. He raised his eyes at the sound of her footsteps, and what Emily saw in that gaze made her stagger. "She found out," he said simply, his voice hoarse. "She found the pages from my notebook, those that you sent to me," Emily completed, feeling the weight of realization fall on her shoulders. "I should have been more careful. More honest, He ran his hands over his face, suddenly looking aged. She didn't deserve to find out like that. Emily felt her heart, that organ that now seemed more a source of torment than life, tighten in her chest. "How is she?" "Stable. They found her in time." But he let the sentence die in the air, the weight of the unspoken hanging between them. At that moment, Dr. Simmons, the psychiatrist on duty, approached them. His grave face told everything his words tried to soften. Sophia would need psychiatric, hospitalization, intensive monitoring, time. Emily watched as Nathan signed the necessary forms, his hands trembling slightly. When he finished, their eyes met again, and she saw in them a pain that went beyond guilt. It was the weight of all the wrong choices, of all the poorly managed loves. "We need to talk," she said softly, leading him to an empty room. As soon. As the door closed behind them, Nathan began. "Emily, No," she interrupted him, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "Listen to me. What happened today, this is exactly the kind of destruction I've always tried to avoid in my life. This is why I built all those walls you criticized so much." "We can't control how people react to difficult truths," he argued, taking a step toward her. "But we can choose not to create these situations in the first place," she responded, stepping back. "Look at us, Nathan. A few weeks of stolen encounters, beautiful words, and impossible fantasies, and look at the result. Are you reducing everything we feel to that?" I'm being realistic, something we should have been from the beginning. Nathan ran his hands through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his face. So that's it? We're simply going to give up because things got difficult? We're going to do what's right, she corrected, though each word seemed to tear a piece from her heart. You need to be by your wife's side now. She needs help, support. What about what I need? He interrupted, his voice almost a whisper. What about what you need? Emily felt tears burning in her eyes, but didn't allow them to fall. Sometimes what we need isn't what we should have. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, it seemed the entire hospital had stopped breathing along with them. You're right, Nathan finally said, and there was a defeat in his voice that broke what remained of Emily's heart. As always, you're right, but it doesn't make it easier. No, she softly agreed. It doesn't. When she left the hospital that dawn, Emily drove aimlessly through Boston's empty streets. The city seemed different, as if it had lost part of its color, its music. At some point, she found herself parked by the Charles River, watching the water shimmer under the faint light of the waning moon. Her phone vibrated one last time. With trembling hands, she read Nathan's message. They say time heals everything, but how do we heal lost time? How do we heal the what-ifs that will haunt us for the rest of our lives? Goodbye, my heart doctor. Emily let the phone fall onto the passenger seat, finally allowing the tears to come. She cried for everything that could have been, for everything that would never be, for the weight of right choices that sometimes hurt more than mistakes. What she didn't know was that night, that end that seemed so final, was just another chapter in a story that fate hadn't yet finished writing. Because some loves, like some diseases, have a habit of resurging when we least expect, testing not just our hearts, but our entire capacity to believe in second chances. 6 months can pass like a breath, or like an eternity. For Emily, each day after that night at the hospital dragged with the weight of all the unspoken words, all the paths not taken. She plunged into her work with a dedication that bordered on obsession, accepting more surgeries, more shifts, more anything that could keep her mind occupied. The world kept turning. The news spoke of Sophia Reed's recovery at an exclusive clinic in Switzerland, of Nathan's temporary withdrawal from business, of a supposed crisis in the Reeds' marriage that the society columns tried to disguise with elegant euphemisms. Emily tried not to follow, not to search between the lines of the news for some sign, some hidden message. But her heart, that stubborn organ that refused to obey reason, still jumped every time she heard his name. It was on a particularly exhausting afternoon, after a complex transplant surgery, that she received the visit that would change everything again. Dr. Mitchell, the soft voice made her freeze in her chair. May I come in? Sophia Reed was standing at the door of her office, thinner than Emily remembered, but with a serenity in her gaze that wasn't there before. She wore an elegant beige ensemble, and her hair, previously impeccably dyed, now displayed grey streaks that somehow made her more human. Mrs. Reed, Emily managed to say, automatically standing up. Please, Sophia interrupted her, entering the room and gently closing the door behind her. I think it's past time we had an honest conversation, don't you think? Emily felt her heart accelerate, but maintained the professional composure that had become her second skin. How is your health? Better, Sophia replied, sitting in the chair across from Emily's desk. 6 months of intensive therapy have that effect. You learn to see things with more clarity. There was something in the way she said the word clarity that made Emily tremble internally. You know, Sophia continued, her fingers idly playing with the strap of her purse. For a long time, I lived in a kind of elaborate denial. I built a perfect life around a marriage that had been dead for years. Nathan and I, we were good at keeping up appearances, perhaps too good. Mrs. Reed, Sophia, please, she gently corrected. And let me finish. I need to say this, and you need to hear it. Emily nodded silently, her heart beating so hard she was sure Sophia could hear it. When I found those pages from Nathan's notebook, something in me broke. It wasn't just the discovery of betrayal, although that hurt. It was realizing that, for the first time in years, he was truly alive, in love. And it wasn't with me. Silent tears began to roll down Sophia's face, but her voice remained steady. My attempt to, well, wasn't just because of you two. It was the culmination of years of self-deception, of loneliness disguised as social commitment, of emptiness filled with appearances. The clinic helped me see that. Why are you telling me all this? Emily asked, her voice almost a whisper. Sophia raised her eyes, meeting Emily's with surprising intensity. Because I'm divorcing Nathan. Because after so long pretending, I chose to be honest, with myself and with everyone around me. And because I think you need to know that you're not the villain in this story. None of us is. Emily felt the world spin slightly. We stopped everything. That night, at the hospital. I know, Sophia smiled sadly. Nathan told me everything during one of our joint therapy sessions in Switzerland, about how you chose to walk away, about how you put my well-being above your feelings. That means a lot to me. A heavy silence fell over the office, filled only by the soft tick-tock of the clock on the wall. He doesn't know I'm here, Sophia continued after a moment. Actually, he's in London overseeing the opening of a new branch of the company. But before leaving, he told me something I can't forget. He said that some loves are like certain heart conditions. They may be silent for a while, but they never really go away. Emily felt her hands tremble slightly on the desk. What exactly are you trying to tell me, Sophia? I'm saying that life is too short to live halfway, that after almost losing mine, I learned that true courage isn't in clinging to empty promises, but in having the honesty to admit when it's time to let go. She stood up, adjusting her purse on her shoulder. Nathan is in London until the end of the month, at the Savoy Hotel in Westminster. The rest is up to you. Before leaving, Sophia turned one last time. You know what I learned in these 6 months, Doctor? That sometimes the heart needs to break completely to be able to truly heal, and that there's no medicine in the world that cures the regret of not having tried. When the door closed behind Sophia, Emily remained motionless in her chair, feeling the weight of all the possibilities that had just opened before her. Her phone was there, on the desk, silent but full of promises. Outside her office, the life of the hospital continued its normal rhythm. People were born, people died, hearts were fixed and broken every minute. But inside that room, a woman who had spent her entire life caring for others' hearts finally allowed herself to hear the beats of her own. The question now was, what would she do with this second chance that fate so unexpectedly had placed in her hands? Because some decisions, like some surgeries, can't wait forever. And some loves, like some hearts, deserve a second chance to beat in the right rhythm. The decision didn't come easily, nor did it arrive in a flash of certainty. It built slowly, over the following days, like the gradual strengthening of a damaged heart muscle. Emily found herself walking the halls of St. Michael's with a distracted air, her mind constantly pulled across the Atlantic to a city she had visited only once, years ago. It took her exactly 1 week to make the necessary arrangements. A leave of absence from the hospital, her first in 7 years, a sublease for her apartment and a one-way ticket to London. When she finally boarded the plane at Logan International, her practical mind tried to remind her of all the reasons. This was madness. Professional reputation, practical logistics, the sheer improbability of a happy ending. But for once, her heart spoke louder than her mind. London greeted her with typical British weather, a soft, insistent rain that seemed determined to wash away all certainties. The Savoy stood majestic along the Thames, its classic architecture, a testimony to enduring elegance across time. Much like certain loves, Emily thought, as she stepped through its grand entrance, her heart pounding against her ribs like an impatient visitor. I'm here to see Nathan Reed, she told the receptionist, trying to keep her voice from trembling. The woman's polite smile never wavered. I'm afraid Mr. Reed has left instructions not to be disturbed. He's working on a rather important project. Could Could you just tell him that Dr. Mitchell is here? Emily Mitchell. Something in her tone must have conveyed the gravity of the moment, for the receptionist's expression softened slightly. "One moment, please." The minutes that followed stretched like hours, as Emily stood in the opulent lobby, suddenly conscious of her travel-worn appearance and the sheer audacity of what she was doing. Just as doubt began to creep in, the elevator doors opened, and there he was. Nathan Reed looked both exactly the same and completely different. There was a new dignity in his bearing, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. But his eyes, those green eyes that had haunted her dreams for 6 months, widened with unmistakable shock when they found her. Emily, her name on his lips sounded like a question, a prayer and a statement all at once. "I should have called first," she began, suddenly unsure. This was probably... She never finished the sentence. In 3 long strides, Nathan crossed the distance. Between them, pulling her into an embrace that felt like coming home after a long, exhausting journey. Around them, the busy lobby of the Savoy continued its elegant hum, but they might as well have been alone in the universe. "You came," he whispered against her hair, his voice thick with emotion. "I came," she confirmed, finally allowing herself to relax into his arms. Later, in the privacy of his suite overlooking the Thames, they talked for hours, about the past 6 months, about Sophia's unexpected visit, about the painful process of ending a marriage that had been more illusion than substance for years, about fear and courage and second chances. "I wrote to you," Nathan confessed, 100 times, maybe more, letters I never sent, messages I drafted but deleted. "Why didn't you?" Emily asked, watching the play of city lights across his features. "Because you were right that night at the hospital," he replied, his honesty as direct as ever. "We created chaos, pain. I needed to fix what I could before I had any right to ask for another chance. And Sophia, is she truly better than she's been in years?" he confirmed. "The divorce was not easy, but it was necessary for both of us. She's found her own path now, running the Foundation's art program, reconnecting with her painting, living authentically, maybe for the first time." The night deepened around them, rain tapping gently against the windows as they carefully rebuilt the bridge between them. Stronger now, more honest, forged in the fire of consequence and choice rather than just emotion. "I can't stay in London forever," Emily said as dawn began to lighten the sky. "My life, my work is in Boston." "I know," Nathan replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. "But my business is increasingly global. There's no reason I couldn't base more of my operations on the East Coast." "You would do that, Emily," he said, taking her face between his hands. "I've spent 6 months learning that life is too short for half measures and compromises. When you know what matters, truly matters, you move mountains to protect it." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of discovery, both of London and of each other. They walked along the Thames at dawn, discovering the city as it awakened. They had late dinners in tiny hidden restaurants where no one knew Nathan Reed, the business magnate. They built 1,000 new memories to replace the weight of what-ifs that had haunted them both. When they finally returned to Boston, together this time, it was to begin the careful work of building a life that belonged to them alone. Nathan rented an apartment in Cambridge, close enough to St. Michael's for Emily's early surgeries, but far enough from their past to feel like a fresh start. The transition wasn't seamless. There were raised eyebrows at the hospital, whispered gossip in social circles, the inevitable adjustments of 2 independent lives learning to intertwine. But for every challenge, there was the unshakable certainty that they had earned this chance, not taken it, not stolen it, but earned it through honesty and patience and the courage to wait for the right time. 6 months after their London reunion, on a crisp fall afternoon with leaves crunching beneath their feet in the Boston Public Garden, Nathan took Emily's hand as they passed the spot where the swan boats would return in spring. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice casual but his eyes intent. "A dangerous pastime," she teased, the lightness in her tone a testament to how far they'd come. "About permanent arrangements," he continued, pulling her gently to a bench overlooking the water. "About waking up next to you every morning, not just when our schedules align. About building something lasting, something real. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken, that faithful metronome that had led her back to him. Nathan Reed, is this a proposal? It's a question, he replied, taking a small black notebook from his pocket, so similar to the one that had started everything. I've written it down, actually. Page 17. With fingers that suddenly trembled, Emily opened the notebook to find a page containing just one line, written in his familiar handwriting. Will you marry me, Dr. Mitchell, and let me spend the rest of my life loving your extraordinary heart as thoroughly as you fixed mine? Her answer came not in words first, but in the tears that spilled freely down her cheeks, tears so different from those shed in her car that night, months ago. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady with certainty. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. Their wedding took place the following spring, a small ceremony in the chapel at Massachusetts General Hospital where Emily had completed her residency. Sophia attended, elegant in blue, her new partner, a kind-eyed art professor by her side. The past had not been erased, but transformed into something new, something honest. At the reception, held in the glass-enclosed garden of the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, Nathan raised his glass for a toast that left few dry eyes in the room, to second chances and brave hearts. To the doctor who taught me that some conditions can't be cured, only embraced, and to all of you who helped us find our way back to what matters most. Later that night, as they danced under strings of twinkling lights, Emily rested her head against her husband's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of the heart she had once literally held in her hands. Happy? Nathan asked, his voice a soft rumble against her ear. Beyond words, she replied, lifting her face to his. You know what I realized today? All those years I spent building walls to protect myself, I was actually just waiting for the right person to show me how to build doors instead. The years that followed brought their own challenges and joys. Emily continued her pioneering work in cardiology, eventually heading a new research center focused on regenerative heart therapies. Nathan redirected much of his business empire toward medical innovation, founding a non-profit dedicated to making cutting-edge cardiac care accessible to underserved communities. They divided their time between a brownstone in Beacon Hill and a cottage on the Maine coast, where they retreated when the pace of their lives demanded balance. Not every day was perfect. They argued, compromised, sometimes went to bed still working through disagreements. But beneath it all ran the current of absolute certainty that they had chosen each other deliberately, with eyes wide open to both the beauty and complexity of true partnership. On their 5th anniversary, Emily found Nathan standing on their cottage porch at dawn, watching the Atlantic waves crash against the rocky shore. She slipped her arms around him from behind, feeling the familiar solidity of his presence. Early riser today, she observed, resting her cheek against his. Back. Just thinking, he replied, covering her hands with his own. About how one heart attack changed everything. About how sometimes the things we fear most turn out to be doorways to everything we need. Emily smiled, turning him to face her. The renowned businessman getting philosophical before coffee? The renowned cardiologist married a sentimental fool. She only has herself to blame. Their laughter mingled with the cry of seagulls and the rhythm of waves, nature's own heartbeat. And in that moment, as the first rays of sun painted the ocean in shades of gold, Emily Mitchell Reed knew with absolute certainty that some hearts, like some loves, find their perfect rhythm not in the absence of scars, but in the strength that comes from healing together.